I don't understand what happened those nights in July 2015. I've tried my best to find answers, but none of the explanations feel right. They don't make sense. I'm telling my story now because I think something similar is happening again, and I'm not sure if I'll make it out alive this time. I was 16 at the time. My family lives pretty far from the nearest town, tucked away in a place so remote that the world outside feels miles away. The peace is nice, quiet, no distractions. But it comes with a price. Long, exhausting bus rides, terrible Wi-Fi, and worst of all, isolation. I can't even drive, so getting to town means walking miles through dirt roads, with nothing around but trees and empty fields. Every year, my family takes a vacation to some beach resort. I hate it. Sand gets everywhere, and with my social anxiety, it's a nightmare. That year, I decided to stay home. I couldn't bear the thought of being in that crowded, sunny place, so I stayed in the house alone, with nothing but the storm and my own thoughts to keep me company. It was July 17th, 2015, the day everything started. Since I was staying home, my parents had mentioned ordering me a video game to pass the time. They didn't tell me the name of it, just said it would be here soon. Honestly, I didn't care much. I had enough distractions to keep me busy, watching TV, listening to music, doing a little archery practice. But that evening, as I stepped out into the yard to stretch my legs, something about the air felt wrong. The sky darkened, thick clouds swallowing the sun. Then it came the storm. The wind picked up with a howl, bending the trees like they were going to snap in half. The rain came down in sheets, slamming against the windows, and the thunder wasn't just loud, it was deep, like the sky itself was roaring in agony. It felt almost alive. I was used to storms out here. Living so far from the town, you get used to them. But this one didn't feel like any storm I'd seen before. I remember looking at the weather app on my phone, but my memory of it is hazy. The storm seemed to appear out of nowhere, without warning. Or maybe it did warn me, but I just didn't pay attention. I couldn't be sure anymore. Hours passed, and I found myself on the couch, half distracted by the flashing lights and booming thunder outside. That's when it happened, the knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and I didn't hear the truck pull in, but there he was. Standing on the doorstep when I opened the door, a man I didn't recognize, wearing a dark, faded jacket. His face was pale in a way that wasn't just a lack of sun, but more like he hadn't seen daylight in years. His long black hair hung around his face, unkempt and tangled, like he didn't care to brush it. His eyes, though there was something wrong about them. They were vacant, glazed over, like he was staring through me instead of at me. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, tall and unnervingly still, his long, thin fingers wrapped tightly around a small, nondescript package. His breath reeked, not of sweat or cigarettes, but of something worse, rancid. It wasn't just unpleasant, it was suffocating, like he'd been trapped in a closed room for days. I had to swallow the bile rising in my throat to stop from gagging. "Here's your package," he said, his voice flat, mechanical, as if he were just going through the motions. I muttered a barely audible thanks, barely meeting his gaze, feeling my pulse quicken as I reached out to take the package. It was heavier than I expected, the cardboard rough beneath my fingers. But there was something else about it, too, something that made my skin prickle. Familiar in an unsettling way, like I'd seen it before in some forgotten dream or distant memory. The man didn't leave immediately. He stood there for a few seconds, blinking slowly, almost unnaturally so. His eyelids fluttered, like they were struggling to stay open. The silence between us stretched longer than it should have. There was no hurry in his movements, no urgency, just a strange stillness that seemed to press in on me. And then, without a word, he turned. His long legs took slow, deliberate steps back, toward the truck, which had been parked some distance away. The headlights cut through the rain in sharp beams, casting long, shifting shadows across the yard. But even as he walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that his eyes were still on me. I stood in the doorway, frozen for a few moments, just staring at the truck as it pulled away into the storm, the headlights fading into the darkness. Something in me screamed to shut the door, to lock it, to forget the whole thing. But my feet were routed to the floor, and I felt watched. Eventually, I closed the door, the sound of the latch clicking louder than it should have in the empty silence. I glanced down at the package in my hands, and for a moment, I thought about just setting it aside, leaving it unopened. But I couldn't. Something urged me to open it to see what was inside, and so I did. I set the package on the kitchen table and grabbed a knife, slicing through the tape. Inside was a brand new game case, the plastic still smooth and unscratched. The spiral. I turned the case over, expecting to recognize the title, or at least the publisher, but nothing rang a bell. The cover was minimalist, just a dark blue background with a swirling white spiral at the center. No flashy artwork, no tagline. The back of the case wasn't much more informative. A single sentence stood printed above the barcode. Some paths lead forward, others lead nowhere. There was no description, no screenshots. The only real detail was the developer's name in tiny print vellum. Interactive. Never heard of them. I frowned. My parents had mentioned ordering a game for me, but they hadn't said what it was. I figured they just picked something off a bestseller list, but this wasn't exactly famous. It didn't look cheap or bootleg though. The packaging was sleek, the disc professionally printed, no signs of it being some weird knockoff. A crack of thunder shook the house, making me jump. The storm was getting worse. I glanced toward the window. Rain hammered against the glass, blurring the view of the yard. One of the wooden rocking chairs on the porch had already tipped over, its legs half sunken in a growing puddle. The trees at the edge of the property swayed violently, their branches whipping in the wind. I hesitated for a moment. If the power went out, I risked corrupting my console's data. Then again, what else was I going to do? Read. I slid the disc into my PlayStation 3 and sat back on the couch. The screen went black. For a second, I thought the power had cut out. Then, soft, ambient music started playing, a low, pulsing hum, like wind passing through an empty tunnel. White text faded onto the screen. Vellum Interactive Presence. Then the title appeared. Clean and simple. The spiral. The background was subtle but strangely captivating, a still image of a lake at night, rain dimpling its surface under a hazy, flickering light. The colors were muted blues and grays, soft enough to almost feel real. I navigated to New Game and pressed Start. A single line of text appeared. Your brother is away. You agreed to watch his house while he's gone. Then, the game loaded and my character stood on a quiet suburban street. The graphics were pixel-based, but incredibly detailed, realistic lighting. Dynamic shadows, individual raindrops rolling down surfaces. It reminded me of those high-end indie games that blended retro aesthetics with modern effects. The neighborhood looked ordinary, but off. The houses had no interior lights, just dark, reflective windows. The streetlights flickered slightly, their pools of light barely cutting through the surrounding darkness. And when I tilted the camera up, I noticed something strange. There was no sky, just an empty black void stretching overhead. No stars, no moon, nothing. I guided my character forward. Their footsteps made soft splashes against the wet pavement. The house I was meant to watch stood at the end of the street, its porch light the only true source of warmth in the entire scene. As I reached the front door, a notification popped up in the corner. New objective. Enter the house. I pressed the interaction button. The screen faded to black for a moment. Then, just before the game loaded the next scene, something strange happened. For less than a second, almost too fast to register, the screen flashed white. And in that flash, I could have sworn I saw something, a shape, a figure, standing in the darkness beyond the house. Then, the game continued as normal. A list of objectives appeared in the corner of the screen. Mop the floors, clean the dishes, unpack. Simple enough. I moved my character through the dimly lit house, noting the level of detail in the environment. The wooden floors had a glossy sheen, reflecting the occasional flicker of light from outside. Every surface looked slightly damp, like the humidity from the storm had seeped into the walls. I found a mop in the storage closet and got to work. The sound design was oddly realistic, the soft swish of the mop against the wood, the distant rumble of thunder outside. When I finished, I moved to the kitchen and washed the dishes. Water ran from the faucet, pooling in the sink before swirling down the drain. Nothing overtly scary had happened yet, but something about the game felt wrong. I finished the last task, packing a suitcase in the bedroom. As soon as I did, the screen flickered. A faint electronic beep echoed through the in-game house. The computer in my character's room had turned on by itself. I guided my character to the desk. On the monitor was a simple, old-school interface, black screen with white text. A blinking cursor waited beneath a single word. Survey. There was no option to exit. I hesitated, then pressed enter. The first question appeared. Are you alone? I smirked. Okay, so this is a horror game after all. I selected yes. Is there a storm going on? I frowned. That was oddly specific. I clicked yes again. Are there any firearms in your house? My breath caught in my throat. This was definitely crossing into unsettling territory. It was just a game, though some psychological horror trick meant to get under my skin. I selected no. Are you white? What the hell? I clicked yes, feeling a weird sense of unease crawl over me. Do you suffer from any mental disorders? My hands were starting to sweat. I clicked yes. Do you live in the mountains? I stared at the screen. That wasn't just a generic creepy question anymore. That was personal. I hesitated longer this time, but eventually I clicked yes. Is your name Henry? I stopped breathing. The cursor blinked. The storm outside seemed louder now, the wind howling against the windows. This isn't possible. My fingers hovered over the controller. I almost backed out, almost shut the whole console off. But my curiosity, or maybe something deeper, made me press yes. The screen went black for a second. Then my character turned toward the bedroom window on his own. And standing outside, barely illuminated by a flicker of lightning, was the mailman. He wasn't moving. He was just watching. Even though it was just pixels on a screen, my stomach dropped. A chill ran down my spine, an instinctual dread settling into my bones. Something shifted in the air around me. I had the sudden, unbearable feeling that I was being watched. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window behind me. The storm raged outside. The trees swayed violently, but there was no one there, just me. In the night, when I looked back at the screen, the mailman was gone. The survey had completed. A final message appeared. You feel tired? Go to sleep. I exhaled shakily. I should have stopped playing right then, turned it off, done anything else, but I didn't. I moved my character to the bed, watching as the screen faded to black. Then, without warning, a new scene loaded, a maze. Tall concrete walls stretched endlessly in all directions, their surfaces slick with rain. My character stood at the entrance, the storm still raging above, but something was different. The thunder had a strange, distorted quality to it, like a deep voice rumbling beneath the sound. And then I saw it. A massive shape loomed above the maze, its dark form shifting unnaturally against the sky. It was impossible to make out any details, just the sheer size of it, something vast and watching. I had no choice but to move forward. I wandered the maze for what felt like forever, each corner revealing nothing but more endless pathways. The air felt thick, suffocating, like something was pressing in from all sides. Then, suddenly, the screen cut to black. I waited. 30 seconds, a minute. The game wasn't frozen, it was just empty. And then, a distorted version of the mailman's face flickered onto the screen. His eyes were sunken, his mouth moving, but the words were garbled, inhuman. The smell hit me then, that rancid stench. Not in the game. In my room, I gagged, covering my nose. My vision blurred, my stomach twisted, and on the screen, the mailman stepped closer and closer. Then, without warning, a his hand reached out of the TV. I scrambled backward off the couch, and then everything went dark. The game returned to normal. I should have turned it off right then, smashed the disc, destroyed the console. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something I don't know what had rooted itself inside me. A pull stronger than reason. My hands moved on their own, selecting continue. A new objective appeared. There was a noise in the basement. Investigate. The air in my house suddenly felt heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on me. The wind outside howled, rattling the windows. The storm wasn't letting up. Still, I played. My character moved cautiously down the creaking stairs into the basement. The hallway stretched unnaturally long, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. As I walked, the walls seemed to press inward, narrowing the further I went. At the very end of the hall, a single framed painting hung on the wall. It was a portrait of the mailman. Dated 1731. My stomach turned. The character stood frozen in front of it for a moment, then the screen flickered and my character collapsed. When he woke up, the game had changed. I wasn't in the same house anymore. Or at least, it wasn't how I remembered it. The furniture was older, warped with time. The walls were a different color. It was like the house had reverted to a version of itself that existed before my family moved in. Outside, the rain continued to pour. But the sky had eyes. Hundreds of them, massive and blinking, shifting in the clouds like they were watching me, watching through the game. Their tears fell as the rain, streaming down in heavy sheets. A knock at the door. A new objective appeared. Investigate the knock. I hesitated. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, I guided my character toward the front door and opened it. The mailman stood there, motionless. The sky's tears turned red. I told myself it wasn't real, that the graphics weren't good enough to make it convincing. But the longer I stared, the more I could feel it. Then, a knock, not in the game. At my real front door, I whipped my head toward the sound. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. I crept toward the door, my hands trembling, and peeked through the peephole. Nothing. I looked out the window instead. And in the distance, lying in the soaked grass, was a deer, dead, probably killed by the storm. I swallowed hard and backed away, grabbing the kitchen knife, before sitting back on the couch. I didn't know why I did it, but I resumed the game. The sky's tears faded back to normal rain. The mailman was gone. A crack of thunder shook the screen, and inside the game, the TV turned on by itself. A low, static hum filled the air. Then, the mailman crawled out of the TV. His face was distorted, stretched in unnatural ways, his mouth moving, speaking in some broken, unintelligible language. I leaned closer, trying to make out the words, when my real-life TV exploded. So did the console. Glass and plastic shards scattered across the floor. Smoke filled the air. My ears rang from the blast, but the TV had been far enough away that I wasn't burned. And then, for a split second, I saw them. The eyes, outside my real window, crying, then they were gone. A deep rumbling shook the house, far worse than before. It was constant, like the thunder had swallowed the sky whole. The power cut out, plunging everything into darkness. I grabbed the knife and stumbled upstairs. But the second I reached the hallway, I froze. It wasn't my hallway anymore. It stretched, longer than it should have, far longer than I could see. It extended endlessly, swallowed by shadows at the far end. The whispers started soon after. I don't know where they came from, but they were everywhere. Soft at first, then growing louder, like a crowd just out of reach. I couldn't make out the words if they were words at all. The rain outside was relentless. The ground was so flooded it looked like a lake had swallowed the yard. Then a window shattered downstairs. My breath hitched. My grip on the knife tightened. I told myself it could have been the wind, the storm, but I didn't believe that. I should have called the police. But part of me, maybe, the part that had been playing that cursed game, whispered, "You have to check first." So I did. I crept downstairs, my pulse hammering in my ears. The living room window was broken, shards of glass littering the floor. The wind howled through the opening, but nothing else seemed disturbed. Then I saw him, standing there. Inside my house, the mailman.com. I didn't think. I just ran at him, knife in hand, and plunged it into his gut. Nothing came out, no blood, no reaction. I blinked, and he was gone. But the pain hit me instantly. I looked down, and I was bleeding. A deep, searing pain spread through my stomach. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping. My hands pressed against the wound, warmth seeping between my fingers. I fumbled for my phone, dialed 911. The wait felt endless. I did what I could with the first aid kit to slow the bleeding, but time warped in my pain and fear. I thought I was going to die there, alone in that storm. But eventually, the flashing lights arrived. The paramedics rushed me to the hospital. The police searched the house. They found nothing. No sign of forced entry. No evidence of an intruder. The window had been broken from the inside, and the game. Just a normal house-sitting simulator, the long hallway. Gone, the TV, completely fine, like none of it ever happened. But I know the truth, and I know it's happening again. Because there's an unexpected storm outside, and someone won't stop ringing the doorbell.